All right, so good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm very happy that you're here, and I'm very happy to be here with you. I want to thank everybody who signed up for this. And let me just talk a little bit before I begin about the course. This is going to be a 6-part course. It will run for 6 weekly classes that run over, in fact, 7 weeks. All of the dates are on the website. The website. There's one class that I'm not going to be able to do. And this is a course that I wrote because I am constantly fascinated by the fact that human beings don't really see what's under our noses. And I find that that is a pattern that repeats in so many ways in our Jewish lives, right from the beginning of the story in the Torah of Hagar at the well, and the rabbis understanding that there was a well there all the time. It was just that she couldn't see it. I feel like I keep bumping into this theme that there are things hiding right under my nose. They were always there. It's like that feeling of you're looking all over for your glasses and they're on your head. Yeah. And the more I thought about it, the more I came to realize that this was true of a lot of the Jewish objects with which we are most familiar. In fact, I would almost go so far as to say, sorry, that's someone's phone. I would almost go so far as to say that the more familiar we are with the object, the less we've ever learned about it. These are just objects that we've grown up with, that we see, but there's so much more to them than just the surface that we see. So through this course, we're going to be looking and taking a deep dive, a look at 6 of our most familiar Jewish objects. So no surprises. I don't believe in surprises. I will tell you that today, the 18th of April, we're going to be looking at the mezuzah. And as the course goes on, we will look at candlesticks, we will look at the talit, we will look at challah, which a teacher shouldn't have favorites in a course they create, but challah is my favorite class. We'll look at the shofar, and we will finish by looking at the Torah. Which is the classic example of the object that is hiding in plain sight, but that we might not actually see. Tonight we'll be looking at the mezuzah. By way of introducing ourselves to each other, please just, we're not going to do a go round, but please just drop into the chat if you have a favorite Jewish object. So just go ahead and drop that into the chat. And as the course goes on, I'll be inviting us to bring our Jewish objects along with our pets and our dinner and our tea and our wine. I'll be inviting us to bring our Jewish objects along with us as well. And we'll do a little bit of sharing at the beginning of the class of those objects. But today is not really for bringing. And if the mezuzah is doing its job, it's not in a position where you're easily going to be able to bring your mezuzah onto a Zoom call. It doesn't work that way. So I thought I would start with the object that we can't bring. I also, before we begin, I want to acknowledge that it is the end of Yom HaShoah. We're just coming to the end of the day on which we remember the Holocaust and what we lost, what the whole of European and world culture lost as a result of that cruelty. And I'm thinking of the way that when people run, they take their precious objects with them. So as we honor the Jewish objects in our lives, we can also honor them, I think, as parts of our history that have been rescued and that continue to teach us and continue to hold meaning for us. So I just want to acknowledge that that is where we're standing in the Jewish calendar. I always invite dedications at the beginning of the class. So if you would like to, we will of course dedicate tonight's learning to the memory of those who were lost. But is there anybody who would like to, anybody who we'd like to lift up in dedications tonight? Could be for something happy, could be for something sad. Just go ahead and unmute and let me know. Anyone? Doesn't have to be. All right, then let me invite us instead then to bless our study. It's a mitzvah to study. It's a sacred Jewish obligation to study. And because it's a sacred Jewish obligation, there's a blessing for it. There's a bracha. And the bracha is the same as the bracha that we make on any mitzvah. So it's the same as the bracha that we make on Shabbat candles. And so the wording is includes Asher Kidshanu b'mitzvotav, and then the final words of the blessing are la'asok b'divrei Torah, to get involved in words or in matters of Torah. So if you want to unmute, go ahead and unmute. If not, then not. But please go ahead and share the bracha with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you. And let me invite everybody to mute down and to look in the chat at who we're dedicating this class to this evening. There we are, Esther Chrysler and Paul and Rob and Rachel Brody and Ben. Yes, Ben Ferenc. He was what, 103, Judith? Yeah. A good dedication. A good dedication. Okay. So let's begin. What I've done with this class is that I've gathered some text together. So there will be text. If anybody likes to read out loud, I will be inviting people to read out loud. If not, I can always read, but I far more enjoy it when other people read. And we'll read and we'll learn and we'll talk and we'll see where it unfolds from there. So let me just find us a text. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Let's do that again. Can everybody see the text in the window? Yes. All right. So I had fun. I always have fun putting together illustrations for these text sheets. Is that a good size for people? We could actually go a little bigger, you know. See what happens if that's better, if we go to 150. Okay, so as you can see, what we've got at the top is a series of 7 mezuzot. They're by the Israeli artist Yair Emanuel, and they represent the 7 species of the land of Israel as we find them in the Bible. And I've put them there simply because I find them beautiful. And I think that we can now go straight to our first text. So can I invite somebody to read for us? There's always a silence at this point, but it always resolves. Thank you. Thank you. Please just, no need for the Hebrew, we can read the English.
Okay. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. These words, matters which I command you this day, shall be upon your heart. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
Lovely. Thank you, Kim. Beautifully read. Does anybody recognize this text? Is it familiar to us at all? I'll give you a Shema. It's the Shema.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what we think of as the Shema. And the reason that we don't recognize it, by the way, is that it's another thing that's hiding in plain sight, right? We read it in Hebrew, we hardly ever read it in English. Okay, so this is indeed the Shema, or part of it. It's the first paragraph of the Shema. It's the bit that comes directly after Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and the whispered, except on Yom Kippur, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. And this is what it looks like in English. And you can see that what it looks like in English is that it's a series of commandments that are gathered under the I want to call it the umbrella of love. The idea that these are the ways that we love God. These are the ways that we love the Holy One. And there is more than one mitzvah in this paragraph, this Hebrew paragraph, that is going to turn into a Jewish object. So this is a paragraph that we'll see, we might see again further down the line. But where do we find the mitzvah of mezuzah in this paragraph? Where is it? Where is the mitzvah of mezuzah? And don't be shy.
Yeah.
We're
On the doorpost.
It says mezuzot in Hebrew.
Good. It says mezuzot in Hebrew. There it is. And this is the bit here. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Very good. So let me ask you, let me nominate you a panel of rabbis and ask you, what is the them that we're supposed to be inscribing on the mezuzah, which is what's going to give its name to this Jewish object? When it says inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, what's them?
The words of the paragraph starting with "You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might."
Thank you, Susan. That's you, isn't it?
Yes.
I recognize your voice. Yeah. So it's the words. So this is what the Torah says, and I'm sure if you've been learning with Rabbi Kasha and if you've been learning with other Ikar rabbis as well, the process that I am about to describe is going to be familiar. Judaism is a religion that is anchored in Torah. Actually, it's anchored in the whole of the Hebrew Bible. But the Hebrew Bible doesn't give us the what and the how often of doing a mitzvah. So we can say, we jump to the conclusion, and it's true, oh, this is where we're commanded to make a mezuzah. But the text of the Torah is not telling us anything about the object. Who was it? Do we know who the teachers were who looked at the Torah and said, if we're going to turn this into a mitzvah, if we're going to turn this into something that we can actually do, here's how we're going to do it. In other words, in shorter words, who created the mitzvah of mezuzah? Does anyone know?
Good question.
Okay, so once upon a time, because everything has a story, right?
Yes.
Once upon a time, long time ago, there is an Israelite culture living in the land of Israel. It is the culture that preceded Judaism and which grew in due course into the Judaism that we practice. The Israelite culture, as it was practiced, was a bit different from ours. It had a harvest-based calendar. It had a central cultic site in Jerusalem and some other cultic sites around the ancient land of Israel as well. It had a culture of worship by sacrifice, and it had a calendar that did not include all of the things that we think of as being on the Jewish calendar. The calendar of that culture did not include Purim. It did not include Hanukkah, and nobody lit candles to bring in Shabbat. Those aspects were invented by the generation of teachers leading up to including and after the second exile of the Israelite people from their homeland. The second exile, because the first one was when the Israelites were exiled to Babylon, to Assyria, and the first temple was destroyed. They came back 60 years later, built the second temple, continued to live there, and then in the year 70, the Romans finally, the Roman siege was finally successful, and the people were driven out of the country once more into an exile that continued until the year 1948, when a modern state of Israel was declared in that place. But of course, not everybody has gone back there, and we now have we have a Jewish culture that is in dialogue with itself. Those are the people, that generation of teachers, which rabbis annoyingly always refer to as the rabbis. Like everybody should know what that means. Yeah, the rabbis, capital T, capital R. When I say the rabbis, I am talking about the teachers who, when confronted with the fact of that exile, ask themselves, how do we hold on to who we are? What are we going to do so that we can hold on to who we are? What can we keep? What do we have to invent? What do we have to change in order to hold on to our identity? And out of those questions, what do we keep? What do we invent? What do we change? Came the Judaism that we practice. And it came from those teachers looking, first of all, it came from those teachers deciding that there was going to be such a thing as a sacred text, that the Torah was going to be sacred and was believed to have been given by God. And the rest of the Jewish Bible was also sacred in a lesser way. And then that book was put at the center of the project of invention. Which means that when the rabbis, there I go, and I'm going to keep right on doing it all the way through the course, please get used to it. When the rabbis read the Torah very closely and saw this commandment right here, they asked themselves, well, what are we going to do about it? Or how do we do this? Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Terrific. How? Where, with what, for how long, which words should it be? It says these words, but there's quite a lot of Torah that precedes, there are 4 books plus some that precedes this commandment. Is it all of those words? Is it some of those words? How are we going to put the words together? So our Jewish objects come out of this enterprise of concretizing a mitzvah, of putting bones and flesh on a mitzvah, and asking those questions that are such good leading questions to ask. Often the Torah, sometimes the Torah will tell you why, sometimes the Torah won't. Here the Torah doesn't. Here the Torah said, the Torah is Nike, right? The Torah says, just do it. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Why? Because God says so. Yeah. So we can ask why, we can ask where, we can ask how, we can ask when. Yeah, the Shema should be said twice a day is also something that's instituted by the rabbis. All of those leading questions, all of those questions that we were taught in school that it's good to ask at the beginning of writing an essay, are going to help turn what's written in the Torah into actual mitzvot that people can practice and do. And by doing them, we're going to consolidate our identity. We're going to be able to hold on to the essence of who we are, and we're going to be able to keep on growing. Okay, and that is a pattern that you're going to see repeated over and over again in this course. Yeah, Jewish objects never come from nowhere, but if they're rooted in the Torah doesn't tell you really anything about exactly how you're supposed to do it. For that, we have to thank that generation of teachers. It was arguably, I learned today, the most creative period of our people's history. The most creative period, because necessity was the mother of invention. In the crucible of exile, Judaism grew and kept on growing and continues to grow. And here we are today having a class about it. Yeah, this is what we call survival. It's apt that the class should be as Yom HaShoah is leaving. Yom HaShoah is leaving, and we are still here talking about mezuzot. And why? Because of the artistry and the gift of those first generation teachers. Okay. So if you were to take this commandment literally, which of course rabbis are never going to do because they're rabbis, but if you were to take this commandment literally, what would you do in order to fulfill it? What does the Torah say to do?
It says you can inscribe them on the doorposts of your house. So maybe if you had a big house and you had money, you could hire somebody to make an inscription. Exactly.
So it gives you the mental picture, doesn't it, of a carved doorpost. And in fact, there was a retreat center in upstate New York that had a mezuzah exactly like this. It had the words of the Shema carved on its doorposts by an artist. But as Jeremy, that was you, wasn't it? Not everybody is going to have the wit or the craft or the skill or the budget to be able to do that. Yeah, the mitzvah needs to be made accessible. So the essence of a mezuzah is the words written down. Does anybody know what the words are that are written inside a mezuzah? Because when we say mezuzah, we think the case, but the case is not important. You could put the words, if they're correctly written, inside a Ziploc bag, tack it to your doorpost, and it would be a kosher mezuzah. The inside is more important than the outside. Yeah, the outside is a decoration for the inside. Which is something that we're also going to find with Jewish objects over the centuries. Surah, I see a hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that it's the Ahafta in the following two paragraphs.
Close.
It's not the Shema.
It's the Shema.
But which bit? Our Shema has 3 paragraphs, 3 non-contiguous bits of Torah. They're all in messed up order. But which bits of the Shema are inside a mezuzah?
The first paragraph, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
So the first paragraph and this, the V'ahavta, and also there's one more.
The one that ends with Adonai, Ani Adonai Elohechem Emet.
Actually, not that one, Surah. It's
One
the one
before it.
before. It's the one before. It's the one that we called the second paragraph of the Shema. And the reason is that those 2 paragraphs are the paragraphs that mention the mitzvah. Those are the 2 paragraphs that mention the mitzvah. Let me ask you to mute down when you're not talking, just because I have terrible concentration spans. I wish I didn't, but I do. I get quite easily distracted. So if you mute, that will help me. So do you see how the rabbis have now turned that into a mitzvah? Here we are. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to take the 2 paragraphs of the Torah that both mention this mitzvah. We're going to write them down, and then we're going to put them up on the doorpost of the house. And lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, what you have is what we would call a mezuzah. So the word mezuzah that originally means doorpost, which it does, it's the same doorpost that the children of Israel daubed with blood, same word. A mezuzah now becomes not the doorpost, but the thing that we put on the doorpost. And the thing that we put on the doorpost, the important part is not the inside, but the outside. okay? The inside, the parchment, the Hebrew, it has to be parchment. It has to be handwritten. It has to have no errors. And the Hebrew word for parchment is cloth. So you'll hear people talking about the cloth of the mezuzah, or you got to check the cloth. Let me just write it in the chat in English letters. Here we are, cloth. So the cloth is the important part of the mezuzah. Okay, pause for questions, thoughts, observations, other things.
I have a
Okay.
question.
Yes.
Does it have to be portable? It seems to presage that we're not going to be in one place. We're not going to be permanently in that house, but it's something that can be, I'm not saying easily moved, but it seems like all the objects that we're going to talk about, including the mezuzah, could be taken to a new place, or a new mezuzah could be taken to a new place and put up.
Absolutely right, Leah. And that's part of the truth of a mezuzah. Yeah, that's exactly right. The rule with the mezuzah is that if you sell your house to somebody, you only need one for the house, first of all. You need one on the front door and it will be good for the house. The fact that we have multiple mezuzot, which go on all rooms that are lived in other words, not on bathrooms and not in the garage, but you can put a mezuzah on any other room in your house. The reason that we do that is to beautify the mitzvah. To be expansive about the mitzvah, but to perform the mitzvah, you only need the one. And the rule is that if you are selling your house to somebody Jewish, then you need to leave the mezuzah there for the next owner. And if not, you're allowed to take the mezuzah away. Yeah. So they are portable. They are portable. Rena, and then Susan, and then we'll go to the next text. Yeah.
So does the cloth have to be inscribed by a sofer, a classic sofer who does the Torah scrolls?
Yeah.
Or is it a more expansive?
I wish it were. I wish it were. No, it takes skill to write a kosher mezuzah, to write a mezuzah on parchment that is fit for use. So you're correct. That needs to be written by a professional scribe. The terminology for a scribe, and by the way, there are now more and more women scribes, which is a lovely thought.
That is great.
It's a very good thought. I have a friend who's a woman scribe. She came to New Orleans and checked out Torah's. Her name is Rachel Solston. Let me name her, Rabbi Rachel Solston. She's in New Jersey. Yes, it is a particular skill to be able to write in this way. There are a number of very minute rules about how a mezuzah or tefillin or Sefer Torah should be written. So yes, it's got to be done by a professional. That should not, by the way, stop the teachers among us doing it as a project with children. It's lovely to ask a child, what do you want to write in your mezuzah?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Just as a quick follow-up, so the cloth itself is also deer parchment, as is the Torah scroll, or is it a different material?
Parchment from any kosher animal. So it could be a deer, it could be a cow, it could be a goat, it could be a gazelle if you could get hold of one, I dare say. Yeah, but it has to be, this is part of the minutiae of the rule. Again, pointing, by the way, to the fact that the inside is more important than the outside. Thanks. Susan.
When did the idea of the decorative cases come in, and when was the decision, or how was it made that it goes on the right doorpost and that it's slanted?
Okay, so the doorpost we're coming to, so I'll ask you to hold that question. When did the cases come is a really great question that I can't answer. My feeling has always been that the cases were just practical. Yeah, one of my favorite ways to do a mezuzah, by the way, is to get some wire and a set of pliers and a test tube with a cork in the end. makes a very good mezuzah. Yeah, and then you wrap the wire around the test tube and make a loop at each end to put a nail through. Boom, you have a mezuzah. Yeah, but my thought, Susan, is that it's always just been a practical thing, that you're going to want to keep your mezuzah out of the weather. If you're living in a hot climate, it's going to get sandy and dusty and the parchment will fade. If you're living in a cold climate or a wet climate, then it's going to disintegrate and the letters will fade. And because the letters, the words of Torah, are important and are sacred, then you need something to protect them. So we can't place that in time. What I can say, though, is that the infinity of mezuzah cases that are around and available and are on sale all speak to the beautifying of this particular mitzvah. Good?
Good, thank you.
So let's move to a second text. And in moving to a second text, actually it's a double text. I pull this on us sometimes. The question that I want to ask, that the Torah is not giving me any guidance on, is why would you want to put words on your doorposts and on your gates? I mean, it's all very well, you know, the easy answer, we know what the easy answer is, because I am God and I say so, right? But is there any more to it? Shout out to my sister Judith for that formulation. She's a singer. But is there any more to it than that? And of course, the answer to that is going to be yes, there is. So that's what this second text is dealing with. So would somebody be up for reading out loud the first text of part 2? Don't be shy.
I'll read it, Rabbi.
Thank you, Carol.
Then the officials shall address the troops as follows. Is there anyone who has built a new house but has not dedicated it? Let him go back to his home, lest he die in battle and another dedicate it. Is there anyone who has planted a vineyard but has never harvested it? Let him go back to his home, lest he die in battle and another harvest it. Is there anyone who has betrothed a wife but has not yet taken her and settled her in his house home? Let him go back to his house or his home, lest he die in battle and another take her.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. So that, as you can see, is from the book of Deuteronomy. These are the rules that apply when the nation is going into battle. And the piece that I want us to be focusing on is, is this piece right here. This wording right here, because you see, here is the thing about Hebrew. The Hebrew word bayit is translatable both as house and home. In fact, the Hebrew word bayit or the Aramaic word bayit, when you get into the Talmud, also sometimes translates as wife, which is interesting. Yeah, but what is the difference between a house and a home? They're the same word in Hebrew, so we have to be subtle with our translation. What makes a house, you know, there are songs about this, right? That a house can be a house but not a home. What makes a house a home?
The people who live in it, the family.
Okay, so the presence of human beings in it, all right, makes it a house or a home, turns a house into a home. What else?
Objects that are important and have importance for you, personal items,
Okay.
objects
Okay,
that
so
reflect you.
lovely, lovely. So again, it comes down to this human dimension, doesn't it? A house is a building until it is humanized. Yeah, here in this text, the house is humanized by having by being dedicated. Yeah, and by having a wife in it. Yeah, anyone who has betrothed a wife. Yeah, so it's the point at which the house becomes human. And the symbol For that, the symbol that a house has stopped being a house and has become a home is the mezuzah, as you can see from the earliest translation of the Hebrew Bible. The earliest translation that we have is a translation into Aramaic by a chap who called himself Onkelos. And this is the translation of the last verse that we just read. So would somebody, Carolyn, you read, will you just read this one as well?
And the officers shall speak with the people, saying, who is the man who has built a new house, but not yet fixed mezuzah on it to complete it? Let him go and return to his house, lest through sin he be slain in the battle and another man complete it.
Okay, there you have it. The mezuzah completes the house. It's the mezuzah and the fixing of a mezuzah that turns the house into a home. Now, here's a couple of balls that I want to throw in the air at this point. We know, because we just established, that a house becomes a home. Let me take away the text for a minute so we can see each other's faces. We know that a house turns, because we just established that a house becomes a home when human beings move into it. We know in parallel that a house becomes a home when a mezuzah is fixed onto it. So can we therefore hypothesize that there is some kind of human quality about the mezuzah? Can we hold those two things up against each other? And what would happen if we did? Okay, do you see where I'm going here? If A is like B and B is like C, then is there some kind of relationship between A and C? And because I'm a rabbi, you already know that the answer is going to be, I'm going to say yes. Okay, but that's the trajectory that I would like us to explore, that from the earliest instance of mezuzot and discussions of mezuzot, even though they're a Jewish object, there's something human about them in some way. They're very personal. And not just because we pick designs that we like, there's something inherently human about a mezuzah. And not just the fact that they're made out of skin either. And not just the fact that the ink that they're written with is ink that comes from the natural world, that's made of carbon, and we're made of carbon too. So are there parallels here? There is something human about a mezuzah. Let me lay it out there as a proposition. Okay. I see 2 raised hands and questions in the chat. Let me go to the questions in the chat first. Sura asked, do you have to leave them all or just the one on the front door? Just the one on the front door, Sura. And if you really love the case of the one on the front door, then you can leave a different case. The important thing is the cloth. Yeah, so I actually left my mezuzah on the door in New Orleans as rabbi to rabbi. But you don't have to leave your favorite one. Liddy, are the words in a mezuzah the same as the words in tefillin? The answer is yes and no. Let me briefly answer that tefillin is about there being 4 things. 2 of them are the same paragraphs as the mezuzah, and the other 2 are different. Yeah. Maybe we need to add tefillin. Is the ink special, Susan? Yes, it is. Scribes traditionally mixed their own ink, and it has to be indelible. It has to stay black well before the invention of Sharpies. And what is special about Torah ink is that it's made out of oak gall. Has anybody seen there's a parasite that attacks oak trees and makes little lumps? Yeah, the ink is drawn for you take those little lumps and you grind them up and you mix them with other things. That's what Torah ink is made of. Let me take the 3 hands up, and then we're going to move on to another couple of texts. Leah, Let's go with you, and then Alexandra and Rena.
Okay. Is it something about our ability to make places sacred the way Jacob did? There's that thing, makom. I really don't know the
Mhm.
word, but
Mm.
it was a regular place until he had the encounter, and then it changed.
Lovely.
The place was transformed. So if we
Lovely.
have the mezuzah, we're transforming the space that we go into or that we go out of.
Beautiful. Yes, yes, and yes, and yes. Hold on to that thought. And you'll see it's a core thought, Leah. It's gonna blossom. Alexandra, yeah.
Thank you for this class. I have so many thoughts going on and I didn't get much sleep, so I'm hoping this is coherent, and forgive me if it's not. But my favorite thing are the words on the mezuzah, like that we're instructed to speak about loving God all the time, and that God is one. And so everything is God, and just to talk about it all the time. And I'm grateful to the rabbis for preserving the religion in a time when we were gonna be wiped out if they didn't. But then we get stuck talking about like all the things, the rules of the ink, and we don't talk about loving God when we exit and enter our doors, and we kiss it because we're supposed to, but we don't talk about God. And if we do, we're either like ultra orthodox or super weird. And Jews are missing out on like spiritual experiences in our everyday lives. And this is the most beautiful text and the most beautiful teaching. And what you said, that the Torah doesn't tell us specifically how to. And I was thinking, that's because when someone tells you specifically how to, you lose your agency to figure it out and to make it your own. And so like, I'm so grateful to the rabbis for preserving the religion. And I'm grateful to you for this class, and I'm learning so much, and it's important material. And on Yom HaShoah, when my family was wiped out, I'm also grateful for the time now, like my uncles were killed, like very close family. And I also feel now that like, I don't feel that the Jews are going to be wiped out imminently, or if we are, it's because we don't care about our religion passionately, and we're just so rote. And so I don't know what my like real point is, other than like, it's the most incredible teaching, and yet when we just rotely kiss a mezuzah, we forget what's in it.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that was my point. And that's what makes a house a home, is when we talk about the love and God and spirituality, and like, according to, in my opinion, there are obviously many wonderful homes that aren't spiritual, but that, to bring it back. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you. Thank you. And may your uncle's memories be a blessing, and all of your family. And this is partly what I mean when I say it's hiding in plain sight. You've expressed it very, very eloquently, Alexandra. Yeah, and we'll see as the course evolves. You know, there's a paradox with humans and things, right? As soon as we thingify something, we have to be very, very careful not also to objectify it, to detach ourselves from it. And part of the reason for this course is to try and, you know, describe that other half of the circle and find our way back. Thank you. Thank you. One more question, then we're going to another text. Rena, yeah.
Yeah, the reason that I personally find beauty in the fact that we follow exactly the same procedural instructions for creating a Torah scroll that takes years and so much of a community's resources and focus, and a mezuzah, is that for me, having a mezuzah at the door is having my own piece of a Torah scroll. right? There's a direct through thread there. So the mezuzah that is in Alexandra's words, reminding me when I come into my home and when I bring my family and my friends into my home, that God is one and that we are loved. The same mezuzah that announces to the world this is a home that holds in the unification of the divine. And it's also, the text you were reading earlier was about amulets, right? Protection for soldiers. So we have all three elements. We have the protective element, we have the announcement element, and we have the personal spiritual mantra. So I guess I would rephrase the question, what makes a house a home? What makes a house a Jewish home, right? And for me, a Jewish home, this is a part and parcel of where are those reminders and where are those announcements to the external community.
Lovely, thank you. Hold those thoughts, because the internal, external dynamic, you know, the inside and the outside of the mezuzah we talked about, the inside and the outside of the house we're coming to, it's important. Yeah, and as we follow that, there is more that is going to be uncovered. Let's take another text. There's two things, by the way, that I realize I fear I didn't say. One is that this is a class where the time slot allocated is an hour and a half. Okay, I know that takes us to 9 o'clock and it can be a little late, but I'm aiming for an hour and a half on the class. And second, just because there are texts on the sheet does not necessarily mean that we have to do them. This is like a treasure box for us. And depending on how the conversation goes, I'll be selecting texts as we go along. So please don't worry or feel deprived if we skip a text. It's because we've already covered it better with our own thoughts. Okay, it's the joy of Torah. We continue to invent it. But this one I do want to briefly take a look at, because it touches on what Rena, yes, was just saying, and also gives me a chance, of course, to show you another form of mezuzah case, this one with the Shema written on it. Yeah, notice the letter Shin. We'll be coming back to that. Here is a rationale for mezuzah. Let's see what we think of it. Will somebody read? Oops, I've just noticed a typo. Would somebody read for us?
I can read.
Thank you, Surah.
It is an obligation to write the passages of the Shema and Vahiyeh im Shamoah.
Yep, that's the second paragraph.
Vahiyeh im Shamoah, and fix them on the doorposts of our houses. We should take great care in performing this. Anyone who does take such care is granted long life for themselves and their children. But anyone who does not take care will have their life cut short. Ooh. It should be placed on the in the outer palm's breadth of the doorpost.
And then a commentary on the commentary. I'll explain who these people are in a minute.
Okay. There are those who say that when a person leaves their house, they should lay their hand on the mezuzah and say, "May God guard my going out," etc. And a person would do the same when they enter. From Shulchan Aruch Yored Deah, 275.
275, thank you. So the Shulchan Aruch, the texts that I choose are not chronological. I've arranged them thematically. The Shulchan Aruch is a 16th century law code, and Alexandra, where are you in my window? There's an awful lot of ink that gets spilled on exactly how to do the thing. Yeah, I think that is partly the effect of exile. It's partly the wish to do the thing the best way that you can do the thing. And it does give rise to an almighty amount of detail. which does keep rabbinical schools in business, but occasionally can obscure what's going on directly under our noses. This is a good example of that. But notice here that there is, so the Shulchan Aruch is a 16th century law code. And in the way of Jewish books, yeah, the Torah is quite short. The first law code, the Mishnah, is a little bit longer. The Talmud is longer than the Mishnah. The Shulchan Aruch goes into things more deeply than the Talmud. And that's why Jews have so many books and spend so much money on shipping them. Yeah, everything, the prayer book is the same, by the way. More stuff gets put in and nothing ever gets taken out. It's just the way we are. Yeah, so the Shulchan Aruch is giving us more detail. The Shulchan Aruch was put together by a 16th century rabbi called Yosef Karo, a Sephardi rabbi, and it's traditionally published with the commentary of Rabbi Moshe Isserlis. I don't know if there's anyone on the call who went to Eastern Europe with Ikar, and I also don't know, because it was before my time, whether you went to the Jewish quarter in Krakow, which is a place called Kazimierz. And in Kazimierz, this man's shul is still standing. This is Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, the Ramah, and you can go and you can stand in his synagogue. And the pattern of the Shulchan Aruch is the Shulchan Aruch says, we do it this way. And then the Ramah comes along and says, we're Ashkenazim and we do it this way. Yes, thus preserving the binary nature of Judaism that we love so much. So what we have here is the Shulchan Aruch is giving a reason for the commandment, and the Ramah is adding a little bit of practice. How do we feel about this reason that I've highlighted here? Do we like this rationale? And have we ever heard anything about mezuzah that might resonate with this kind of rationale? Okay, Cypri, you're shaking your head. Talk to us.
Well, it implies that if you get ill or you're hit by a cart, a wagon, it's your fault because you didn't take care of it. Mm. And I have a problem with that. Yeah. Or if something terrible happens to your child falls down the well, it's because you did something wrong. And again, I have a problem with that.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed. Okay. I also find this one problematic. Yeah, but remember, the Torah didn't tell us why. So we're human beings, so we're going to speculate. So we're going to try and work out why. It is the case that people are very fastidious about their mezuzot. And I have encountered people who say something bad happened in my family, and I immediately went and got the mezuzot checked. It's a custom that is alive and well and living among our people. I don't say it with judgment, just because it's a rationale that I find difficult to accept. I don't say it with judgment, and it is something that you will find out there in the world about mezuzot, that people will very serious, and there are people who will tell you anecdotes that something terrible happened to them, and then they got the mezuzahs checked, and the mezuzahs weren't kosher, and they got them repaired, and the terrible thing went away. You will hear stories like that coming out of people's direct experience.
Isn't that a little bit like magical thinking, though?
We can say so.
I mean, no judgment. I totally get it. Yeah. It's like people who believe in voodoo totally believe in voodoo. I can't. It's not my thing. But yes, I get that.
I think it also, with mezuzah particularly, I think it underpins, or there's some kind of resonance with the mezuzah human connection that I proposed earlier. If it is the case that there is something, or there is some human dimension to the mezuzah, then it would follow, wouldn't it, that you would, if you're sick, then maybe it's that your mezuzah is also sick.
Yeah, I get that.
It's yeah. And this is the tradition that this here is the tradition that Alexandra was talking about, that when the mezuzah is there on the doorpost, You acknowledge the mezuzah both on your going out and you coming in, and note the language. The operative word here is guard. That there is something protective about the mezuzah. That it is serving some kind of protective function. Interesting. We talked about the inside and the outside of the mezuzah. The mezuzah is right there on the place where the inside becomes the outside and the outside goes back to becoming the inside. And it would appear as well that there is this tradition from early on, the revised 16th century. There is this tradition that you put your hand on the mezuzah when you are going inside and inside to out, or when you are coming outside to in. It's as if the mezuzah accentuates the purpose of the doorway. Sipra, yeah, I see a hand up.
Sorry, doesn't that, in the opposite would be that if you're in the diaspora, you are then marking yourself as being different, which could be dangerous.
Yes, yes, or even within the land of Israel as well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of ghettos and so forth.
Absolutely, absolutely. It becomes an identity marker. And I think it's China, isn't it? The Chinese, the Kaifeng Jewish community, put their mezuzahs on the inside for precisely that reason. Yeah, it is and again, human, right? Identity is a human thing. Identity is not so much the object itself. Yeah, identity is a human thing, so it's a marking. Interesting. Hold the thought, let it marinate. Yeah, it's a good thought. Judith, and then we'll go on. We might skip a text, but I'm going somewhere with this.
Well, I was similar to what Sipper was saying. I was saying that it's like a combination of a declaration and protection.
Lovely.
Your declaration is, I am a Jew, and yet I know that I am being protected by using the mezuzah, by putting a mezuzah on my doorpost.
Lovely.
It is protecting me and my family.
Lovely, lovely. And again, it's outsides and inside, right?
Right.
Jewish on the inside, so I put a mezuzah on the outside. The mezuzah on the outside is going to protect my Jewishness on the inside. Again, as Alexandra said, you know, it's the way that we remind ourselves, it's the way that we take ourselves out of the ordinary course of our day and take a moment to acknowledge the other dimensions of our day. Good. Do we see how it's layering up? Okay, Jewish objects are fantastic like this. They just get, the more you look at them, the more you see. All right, I want to let me move us forward. And in the next two texts, there are only another two. In the next two texts, we're gonna try going a little bit deeper. I just see this one we can zoom through pretty quickly, but this answers Susan's question. I'm just looking at the chat. Ah, well, Susan, yeah, your father put them inside to avoid being marked as Jewish and painted over the case. Yeah, I saw that in England too. Okay, and there was another, Jane, if you know someone's mezuzah isn't kosher. Oh, Lordy, that's a tricky one. That's a tricky one. Everybody have a quick look at Jane's question in the chat, because this one is a bit of a conundrum. If you know that somebody's mezuzah isn't kosher, do you refrain from touching or kissing it? And if you refrain from touching or kissing it, is it going to embarrass them? I would say that these are questions of judgment. I would always err on the side of not embarrassing someone. Or I would try to. Yeah, I would try to. Better I should kiss a mezuzah, not I personally, you understand, but better a person should kiss a non-kosher mezuzah than embarrass the person who might not be able to, who might not know it's not kosher, who might not be able to afford to repair it. The exception is if you know that it is a mezuzah that is not so much ritually kosher or unkosher, but if it is a mezuzah that is not, if I can put it this way, a Jewish mezuzah. Yeah, then you're taking yourself outside the frame of Judaism by kissing it, and then I wouldn't. You see this, by the way, more with talitot. There's a lot of messianic talitot out there at the moment. If you're very unlucky, your bar mitzvah boy will show up for his bar mitzvah rehearsal on the Tuesday before the Saturday with the talit that his grandparents were sold in Jerusalem, and it'll be a Jesus talit, and then you have to deal with that. Yes, has happened to somebody on this call. It was fine. They were very nice about it, but that's where I would draw my line on your question, Jane. Okay, this one I want to zoom through quickly, so I'll take the read on it. Another piece of the Shulchan Aruch with a commentary from Rabbi Moshe Isserles. The mezuzah should stand upright with its length along the length of the post of the doorway. Has anybody ever seen a mezuzah like that, by the way? A vertical mezuzah. Okay, but here we are in the Shulchan Aruch. It should be set so that the word Shema, which is at the edge of the scroll, faces outwards. Less important. The Ramah, and this is what some people do, but others say that an upright mezuzah is invalid and instead should be laid flat with its length perpendicular to the post of the door. Horizontal mezuzah. So those who wish to be sure of performing this mitzvah correctly follow both opinions and place the mezuzah on a diagonal. That is good practice, and that is what we do here. And the mezuzah should be set so that its head, that is the word Shema, faces inwards with the final lines facing out. So this is how we get the way that we place our mezuzot today. They're not vertical, they're not horizontal, they're somewhere in between. And elsewhere you have the rule that they should be in the upper third of the doorpost. Then all you're left with is the question of which side of the door frame do you put it on if it's an internal door, but you don't have that problem with the front door. Okay, so this just answers the question as to why does a mezuzah look like what it looks like. Okay, so that was just a little bit of extra deliciousness for us, and a rare occasion actually where you have people compromising on a Jewish thing. Let me introduce us to Maimonides and to a very, Maimonides is 12th century. He was a genius. He was a doctor, he was a healer, he was a philosopher, he was a commentator, he was a poet. He wrote his first big Jewish work when he was 24, and in the introduction to it, this is it here, the Mishneh Torah. In the introduction to it, he says, I've collated everything so nobody is going to have to use any other Jewish book ever again. And of course, what happened was that people started jumping up and down going, but you haven't quoted your sources and you've left out my favorite bit. And my teacher didn't say that. And it did absolutely nothing to help with the proliferation of Jewish books. But the Mishneh Torah, the Rambam's Mishneh Torah, 12th century, is always a very good place to go to get distilled views of things. And as we're going to see from this reading, the Rambam also was a man who was not shy about having opinions about things. He's very brusque. He's very brusque. So would somebody who would like to be cross, at least fictionally cross, please read us this text by the Rambam.
I'll do it.
Thank you. Go ahead and be very cross, please.
It is a widespread custom to write the word Shaddai on the outside of the mezuzah between the two passages. This does no harm. The world is on the outside, but those who write names of angels or other sacred names or verses of or other kinds of inscriptions we put on seals All these people are not only failed to fulfill the mitzvah of mezuzah, but have also committed a greater mitzvah, the equal desecration, toward the unity of God's name and the love of God and the service of God by using God's name as if it were a talisman for their own benefit. They think in their own idiocy that the mezuzah will somehow get them some benefit from the vanities of this world.
Thank you, and very, very well read. Thank you very much indeed.
I was gonna ask that question, whether the Rambam said anything in Mishnah Torah, because he goes into detail.
Yeah, there's a great deal more in Mishnah Torah about it, but I particularly like this passage. Partly because it tells us that of this custom that you write the word Shaddai on the outside of the mezuzah between the two passages, okay? So neither within one passage or within the other. Like the doorway, this word Shaddai occupies a liminal space that is neither one space nor the other. It's not on the outside, it's halfway down the stairs, Kermit's nephew Robin would say. Okay, it's not this place, it's not that place, it's somewhere else instead, yeah? And the word, we're going to come back to it, the word is Shaddai, Shin Daled Yud. It's one of the many biblical names of God, okay? And what Rambam is saying here is that it's okay, it's acceptable to write the word Shaddai and only the word Shaddai. It's clear from this, the inscriptions that we put on seals, he's talking about amulets. It's clear from this that other people used to write all sorts of stuff on their mezuzahs, all sorts of stuff that they thought would protect them. Names of angels and other sacred names, or verses, or amulet language, yeah? And he has no time for that at all. These people lose their share in the world to come, which is a terrible thing to say about somebody. And he calls them fools. Rambam loves to call people idiots. He can be very disparaging. He calls people fools because he says to do that is to desecrate God's name. The right way to invoke God on a mezuzah is by the name Shaddai. Anything else is doing it incorrectly, and not just that, anything else is taking us out of the kedusha, out of the holiness of a mezuzah, and taking us instead into superstition. It's misusing the mezuzah. So see how much is packed in here, that there is such a thing as an okay mezuzah. There is such a thing as even a sacred mezuzah. That mezuzah will be marked by this particular name of God, Shin Daled Yud. Anything else extraneous written on a mezuzah is completely unacceptable and is Alexandra, I'm hearing your voice in my head, you know, it's missing the point. Yes, it's completely missing the point of what a mezuzah is there for. Yeah. So there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and which is again a very Rambam way of looking at the world. Yeah, but this also means that at least according to him, a mezuzah is not for worldly benefit. You don't put a mezuzah on your house because it's going to make you lucky. Yeah, or because it's going to bring you good fortune. Yeah, when you up and kiss the mezuzah and you say, may God guard my going out and my coming in, it's not because you want something, or it's not because you want a thing. There's something else going on. In the same way as if you again, let me invoke the human dimensions of the mezuzah. If you were to kiss a human being, you know, if you go and kiss your dad because you want your allowance, it's a different kind of kiss from kissing your dad because you love him. Yeah. And the same is true of the mezuzah. It's important the way that we do these things. Let me pause for questions before the final text, and I promise I'm going to tie all of these threads together. Any other thoughts, observations, questions? Yes, no? There might be things in the chat. Hold on a minute. To use a slang word, I am shook. It's lovely. Yeah. Yeah, Surah is right. The earlier passage, you know, Rambam would have been very cross about that earlier passage. It's actually from a later work, yeah, that you put your mezuzah up so nothing bad's going to happen. He would have found that very suspect, yeah, but there might be something deeper going on. Okay, and I see one more, kissing the mezuzah, kissing Hashem. Yeah, if Shaddai is the acceptable word to use, then there's something else going on when we kiss the mezuzah. Okay, let's go see. So we're going to zone in on the word Shaddai. It's one of the names of God from the Torah. It relates to the early appearances of God. The first time we come across it is when Abraham meets the priest Melchizedek, who is a servant of El Shaddai and who greets Abraham in that name, El Shaddai, God whose name is Shaddai. And we also get that name when Moses is at the burning bush. And God says, I made myself known to your ancestors as El Shaddai, but I did not tell them my name, or I did not make them aware of my name, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, my personal name. Those are the two places where, if you ask somebody where is Shaddai in the Torah, you'll see it. But I would like to suggest that that's not the Shaddai written on the mezuzah. That the Shaddai is written on the mezuzah for another reason. So let me ask somebody to please read this rather lovely piece of poetry. Someone?
I'll take it.
Thank you.
O you who dwell in the shelter of the Most High and abide in the protection of Shaddai, I say of the Lord, my refuge and stronghold, my God in whom I trust, that he will save you from the fowler's trap, from the destructive plague. He will cover you with his pinions. You will find refuge under his wings. His fidelity is an encompassing shield.
Okay. So, question. The shelter of the Most High, the protection of Shaddai, we're talking about God. How is God being described here? What adjectives would you use to describe this portrayal of God? What is God?
Protector.
Protecting?
I would say maternal.
Maternal. What makes you say maternal, apart from the picture?
The pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I chose the pictures because we are going somewhere. Yeah. But why else might it feel maternal? My refuge, my stronghold, will save me from the fowler's trap, will save me from the destructive plague, will cover me with his pinions. Pinions are wings.
I would say parental, rather than maternal, because there are many birds that take turns, like eagles, guarding eggs. So I would say it's equal opportunity for this as a protector and a guard.
Lovely. And I'm thinking of the emperor penguins as well, who put the eggs on their feet and then put the feathers of their belly over them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in Devarim, at the end of the Bible, God is described as an eagle. And the eagle, by the way, carries its young not under its wings, but on top of them. Because there are no predator, the eagle is an alpha predator, so the safest place is above it. Yeah. Tim, I see a hand.
Yeah, I put this in the chat, but it just has made me think about, the blood on the doorposts of Passover and the marking of on the doors, so that we would be protected and God would, pass over us.
Yes.
And the language of that, on the doorposts, and then with putting the mezuzah on the doorposts,
Yes.
and the guarding again and the protecting.
I think
Just-
I think the layers build up very strongly, Leah. I agree. Kim, the layers build up very strongly. I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. Thank you. Yeah. Alexandra, and then Rena, and then I have a punchline to share. Yeah.
I don't, it's sort of like, to me, it's describing Shekhinah in a sense, but it's describing Shekhinah in a masculine, with masculine language, which I find like an interesting, there are all kinds of ways to read into that, I guess, and I don't really know what it is, but it's an interesting mix, and I really like it.
Great.
I like this. Thank you.
It's
beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's really very powerfully beautiful imagery. Let me throw out there, by the way, that in Hebrew, the choice of pronouns is horribly limited. Hebrew linguistically is completely binary. So everything in Hebrew, at least in biblical Hebrew, is either masculine or feminine. Those are your choices. It remains, it is still a challenge for Hebrew to evolve non-binary forms today. One of the things that we do at Ikar when we call people up to the Torah is we say na la'amod, because that is neither masculine nor feminine. That's using an infinitive. But for example, for non-binary folks, a typical Hebrew name will describe you either as someone's son or someone's daughter. And that's gendered language. Yeah, so Hebrew is a fully gendered language. So particularly living now, I think we have to hold the gendering of Hebrew a little bit carefully. The reason, by the way, that God is masculine in biblical Hebrew is that God takes the simplest form of the verb, the most direct form of the verb, which is the masculine singular. That's how God ends up being a man. Yeah, it's grammar. Yeah, but it goes very deep, right? I don't know about you, but I was brought up with the idea that God is male. It took a long time for me to discover feminine language for God. Yeah. But let me take Rena's question. But in fact, God transcends male or female, at least the way that I understand it. Yeah, but these old images are hard to shake. And Alexandra, I think you're right. What you've got here is a blending of the masculine and the feminine. So, English is translated as his because that's the grammar of the Hebrew. But the whole feel of this is quite maternal, quite feminine. Rena, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's more an observation. So El Shaddai, of all of the 70 names of God, is, as I understand it, the most associated with nature. Shaddai is the God who comes from the mountains.
Lovely.
Right? And Jerusalem was the mountain, right, from which God descended for our people in this era that we're looking at the text. So that, I think, opens up an interesting set of questions and goes back to the amulet, the protective nature of the mezuzah, right? Why, of all of the 70 names of God, would you put the God of the mountains on the outside of the mezuzah, right? Because we're looking for that sense of security and that sense of divine protection. Even in the mezuzah case, in my insight.
Love it. I love the way this is going. Let me push it one step further. God of the mountains, right? God of the mountains, El Shaddai. Does anybody happen to know the Hebrew word for breasts?
Shaddai.
Shaddai.
Of course.
Shaddai.
Yeah.
Why do we put, okay, so here's my punchline. Why do we put El Shaddai on a mezuzah? Why Shaddai and not one of the other names? Because we are invoking maternal God.
Mm-hmm.
We are invoking maternal God. Why do we invoke maternal God? Because maternal God guards the doorways. We enter the world through the doorway of maternal God. The first protection that we know as human beings is the protection of our mother and the mountains on her chest. And when we move over liminal space, when we move from inside to outside, when we are vulnerable, when we need guarding, when we need protecting, when we do not know what we're going out to, and we might not be certain of what we're coming back to, the protection that we need is the protection of the breasts. The protection of our original mother. And so a mezuzah, if we're going to gender the mezuzah as an object, the word mezuzah is feminine in Hebrew, but I want to say that the female goes all the way down. That this hiding there in plain sight for us is God as female, marked on our doorposts.
I love it.
As the marker of our identity.
Wow.
Through the world.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Notice how differently this makes us feel. Brittany had a hand up. Yes, Brittany.
I just had a small thought that I feel like, Rabbi, this takes us full circle to the second text that you pointed out about the young man, if he has a betrothed wife, that he would go to his wife and make a home there before he goes off to war. And it's sort of just like that idea, that concept, that full circle idea of like creating a home with that new mother or that new potential mother.
Beautiful. Oh, I just went all goosey. Beautiful, beautiful thought. Yes. And then if we ask ourselves, what makes a home? Mum. Yeah, it's mum that makes a home. Yeah, and everything that is modeled on mum and becomes maternal in its turn. And that's why we write Shaddai on our mezuzot. And that's why we face them outwards, right? Because we know what it's like when mummy goes in to fight for us. Yeah. And that is why the mezuzah, and it's hiding in plain sight. Let me just check the chat. It is 8:58. Oh, Leah, everybody take a look at the chat. Everybody take a look at the chat. We bury the placenta of a newborn baby in the doorway of homes in traditional Japan. Wow. Goodness. And what's the reason, Leah? It's for protection. It's to invoke protection.
My understanding is it's to invoke protection for the newborn itself and for the whole house. The house becomes vulnerable when there has been a birth there.
Wonderful. There is a tradition of burying the foreskin in the garden as well after a circumcision, but I think the symbolic language is different. Alexandra asked, is amito the last word in this text from the same root as Omer? Linguistically, no. Midrashically, pick it up and run with it. I think that's gorgeous. Yeah. Amito is the same word as emet. And emet means not only truth, but fidelity. And that's what it's getting at here. Hang on a minute, what's the Hebrew? Tzina v'sochera amito, his truth is tzina, a shield, and a sochera, an encircling. Socher, sachar means circle. It's a poetic word for the moon. Yeah, but amito here is emet. But if you wanted to go ahead and make that a midrash on Immer, then I say go for it with both hands, Alexandra. That's what midrash is for.
But Amatecha is also your handmaiden.
Yes.
So it's from the same root as truth.
That one is again, I think that
Amatecha, spelled, it's the same root.
Amma. Yeah. Oh, we can go lovely places with the language. Good. Okay, so let me just check the chat one more time. Is the shin for Shaddai, Jeremy? Yes, it is. And that's why you see the letter shin on the outside of so many mezuzah cases. The shin is short for Shaddai. Sometimes you'll see the whole word, and the parchment inside is rolled so that the word Shaddai, which is written on the back of it, faces out. Yeah, the first thing that a person is going to encounter is the mother, the protective mother, standing in the doorway. Lovely. We have one more thing that we need to do, because tonight is tonight, and this will be the same but different for the next few weeks. We need to count the Omer, because we are walking. We are on a journey. We are walking from Pesach to Shavuot. It should be dark enough. Yes, it's dark enough by now. Traditionally, we stand to count the Omer. So you'll see that I offer different translations of the wording of the bracha. But if you would like to rise and join me, today we are just leaving day 12. The tradition is that I can't tell you what we're going to count, because if I do that, oops, we've counted it. Okay, so I can't tell you, we have to do it. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. Ayom 13 yom, shem shavu echad v'shisha yamim la'omer. Today is 13 days, which is 1 week, and 6 days of the Omer. And that verse at the bottom is from Psalm 67, traditionally recited during the Omer because it has 49 words. Elohim yechonenu v'varachenu ya'el panav yitanu selah. May God grace us and bless us, and may the light of God's face be with us. Selah. Thank you for coming. Next week's object is candlesticks. If you have candlesticks with a story, please bring them. We'll share stories. It might make us run a little long. I don't care if you don't. The stories of people's candlesticks are one of my very favorite things. And I shall, thank you. Lovely thank yous coming up in the chat. You are welcome. You are welcome. You are so welcome. I will see you next week if I don't see you before. Let me stop the share so we can all give each other a wave. I'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night and thank you.